I'm Bonnie Hong.
And I'm Brian Williams.
Oh, jeez.
Actually, I'm Ben Hong.
Thank you. Brian Williams.
Yeah.
He's going to go work for Fox.
Oh, he'll be
He
working
already
here pretty
has
soon.
lying down pat, so
All right.
we'll let him go work for Fox.
All right.
Hi, Ben.
Hi, Ben. So, well, Bob Powell isn't here tonight,
No, he has another meeting.
and he has another meeting.
But
He's quite busy.
He really is. He's a busy guy. But he absolutely promoted our show at Rotary today.
Yeah.
And said that I'm funny off camera, but when I get on here and I begin talking about these subjects, I'm like a hawk.
Yeah.
I am not funny at all. So, shall
Well.
we dig right in, or we have?
Well, give us an idea of what you want to say or talk about tonight, Bob.
Okay, we have three topics that we want to discuss. The first one is TPP.
All
Now,
right.
if you don't know what TPP is, it's going to be something. Well, I'll give you a very brief description. It's NAFTA on steroids.
Well, tell me what does TPP stands for,
Okay,
first of
we'll
all, the
start
alphabet
there.
soup that you have.
It's the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And as I said, it's like having NAFTA on steroids. It will encompass 45% of the world's economy. And if we thought that NAFTA lost American jobs and decreased our trade imbalance, this is can be absolutely devastating.
All right. You're losing me because NAFTA has been a long, long time, and I don't really see the similarities. So explain to me what TPP...
The Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Right. What is it?
All right. It's going to be a partnership with 11 countries, Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, and Vietnam.
And what are they planning? What's the plan? What's their plan? What are they planning to do?
Well, I have actually two versions. One is President Obama's statement about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which basically starts talking about how wonderful and what an opportunity this is for we'll be able to export more American goods. But however, that's only possible if American jobs stay here in America. There are a number of loopholes in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which I think all by themselves are very frightening. One is they will have their own judges and lawyers to enforce the treaty. One of the stipulations in that treaty actually states that if a corporation is complying with a government's regulations in some way, for example, our clean water, clean air, clean food, any of our regulations, if they're complying and it's costing them money, that country has to pay that corporation. This is true even for U.S. corporations.
So this is a private corporation, or
It's an agreement, a treaty.
Yes. So are these private corporations, or are these government corporations?
No, they're not government corporations. They're companies within these countries. The agreement states that we have free trade between these countries, which is like NAFTA. When NAFTA was first proposed, I don't know if you remember, Seattle had huge demonstrations. They did embargoes in their ports. They were absolutely opposed to NAFTA. That's the North American Free Trade Agreement. And everything that they talked about, the reasons they were opposed to it, absolutely happened to these countries because obviously the cost of doing business was lower. The same thing will be true with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But what is worse is the small details that are in, and this is being written up in secret. I mean, that's what is, nobody's heard about it. I think when we asked the Rotarians today, and they're very well-educated men and women that belong to Rotary, Bob Farwell and I just asked them, who knows what FPP was? One Rotarian said that he heard a quick blurb on the radio when he was driving, and the commentator was talking about it, and then the moderator on the news said, you had to bring that up, and went right on to another discussion. So if you remember our first show when we were talking about our free press and the media, this is how we get our news.
Well, give us more information about TPP, Bonnie, because I'm really a little bit confused right now what you're trying to say.
Okay.
So these are this is an agreement among 11 countries, and they said that we're going to get together and produce something.
What? All right.
Corporation.
Let me try to make it a little clearer then. One of the things that this is supposedly a free trade agreement. They have 29 chapters in this agreement. So you've got 29 chapters in all of these papers. Only 5 of them actually deal with traditional trade issues. One chapter provides incentives to offshore jobs for low-wage countries. So if they take their jobs, if we get jobs offshore to these countries, they have incentives to do that, to actually take a company from one of the countries that they will have an incentive to actually move the jobs to these low-wage countries. Many impose limits on government policies that we rely on in our daily lives for safe food, clean environment, and clean air. So those limits are being imposed within this treaty on any government that actually signs the agreement. For us to allow any trade to tell us that we cannot have regulations for clean air, clean water, safe food, and without having to fight for it, it's our country, those are our regulations, but they do not have to be honored by any of the corporations within those countries, including our own corporations in the United States. The trade agreement puts limits on them.
Well, I'm still at a loss as to exactly what these companies are trying to do. Are they trying to monopolize some kind of a product?
No, they're trying to maximize their profit, which every company...
trying to take advantage of the fact that they're making a treaty that they can write their own rules and regulations and do something that they can otherwise would not be able to do if they stay in their own individual countries. But we've seen this before. We've seen these things happening in the Philippines. They have such a thing called industrial zone, where they actually have a huge tract of land that's even fenced, and inside that zone are factories, and they make everything that a company would make, except that they cannot sell it to the Philippine people.
They're American companies inside
Right.
those.
And so these are factories that are purposely put into the so-called industrial zone so that they can produce a product at a very cheap price,
Right.
only for export, which basically is nothing more than a foreign company having their
Labor.
factory in a foreign country that provides cheap labor.
Right.
And it still is going on.
With this trade agreement, they don't need to build a fence around it. Those would be the regulations specifically. Our domestic, federal, state, and local regulations, we would have to comply with the Trans-Pacific Partnership rules. We can't make our own rules in this country if this passed. All of our regulations would have to comply with this trade agreement. That's ludicrous, Ben.
Well, I'm not even sure as to at what level of stage they are right now into making this a reality.
They have 29 chapters already drafted.
Yeah, but this all just on papers, though. I mean, they haven't really.
And if we don't stop
any
right now,
infrastructure around here, other than maybe have a commitment from some company that says, sure, we'll chip in so on and so on. So what are you proposing that we do, Bonnie?
That we get knowledgeable about this trade agreement. When you have an agreement that is being cloaked in this much secrecy, why isn't the media reporting on this? This is, again, NAFTA on steroids. At least we heard about NAFTA when it was being proposed. Most of us heard it. A lot of people just assumed that it's going to be good for our economy. After all, the government's doing it. How could it be bad for the economy? This is NAFTA on steroids. If you think Americans lost their jobs because of NAFTA, that's nothing compared to this. Let me give you some of the consequences of this, and it includes pharmaceuticals. The patent rights of a pharmaceutical company are now extended. They are now allowed to charge even more than they do now. At least we have their patents run out at a certain length of time. We can get generics for these drugs. You and I have to talk about, well, maybe we can get into that when we start talking about the vaccines, but undermining food safety. The Trans-Pacific Partnership would require us to import meat and poultry that does not meet U.S. safety standards. It would impose limits on food labeling. How can you even go into?
I'm not really sure, Bonnie, as to what I think about this, because I really don't have any information.
But
But
all you're getting,
all you're getting is actually all the negative things that might even be just some kind of public relation.
Okay, the public relations comes from the office of the president himself, okay? This is the statement from the White House about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, unlocking opportunities for Americans through trade and the Asia Pacific. Now, he's the trade agenda. He is absolutely endorsing this, expanding economic opportunities for American workers, farmers, ranchers, and business. That's why we're negotiating the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a 21st century trade agreement that will boost U.S. economic growth, support American jobs, and grow Made in America exports to some of the most dynamic and fastest growing countries in the world.
It's a kind of a generic statement that says, oh yes, we support some form of trade agreement. Who wouldn't? Especially in an election year.
It sounds great.
That is really something that is a good concept. Then let's just see what the good things they're supposed to be doing.
There's not a single thing in here other than say we're going to, there was one. Environmental protection is at the core of American values, where the U.S. is negotiating for robust environmental standards and commitments from member countries, and addressing some of the region's most pressing environmental challenges. Several times through this statement, he talks about American values. We're doing this because we want to help export core American values. One of the countries that we're including in these 11 nations is Brunei, the country that recently adopted a vicious new penal code threatening the rights and lives of women, lesbians, and gay men. When you read what Brunei does with women, I mean, you want to cringe. I mean, it is. They call everything indecent behavior. If a woman is raped, okay, they will consider it adultery, and it's the woman.
But we're really getting out of the topic, Bonnie, because
I'm talking about American values. There are no American values in this treaty.
All I'm really interested is how much will a steak cost me if I go to a restaurant, and
why do you push that button?
Because
I know that's not what you're interested in.
That's
how much a steak is going to cost you.
Well, that make my steak.
It'll make your steak
better?
Probably no, because there'll be no standards for importing that steak.
Well, that's what they're supposed to be doing, that there is a free trade, meaning that
we don't have to have American
of these
regulations
11 countries,
protecting the food
we
you
made
eat.
what we call as a sweetheart deal with them, making sure that whatever we import will cost us less, which we're already doing because we strong arm every third country in the world to send us their products or raw materials at the very least price. And because if you
And once we do that, the company, the corporation that we've helped support, do that. I mean, we've done that for major corporations in South American countries, where we've gone in to strong arm them, and then the corporation destroys their water, their soil.
Well, we've done that with
the
pineapples and bananas, and then we
Yes.
go over and take their oils from them.
That's right.
And leave them all the, waste products there for them to clean up. At the same time, we sell them our computer chips, and
Yeah,
at the
instead
very
of giving them clean water, we can send over computers for the children
well.
when they don't have schools. And it was like,
So what's wrong with that?
there's a lot wrong with that, Ben.
Well-
You know that. But if people are not aware of what is coming with this Trans-Pacific Partnership, they do not write and call our representatives, our senators, and explain that you are totally opposed to this contract, to this trade agreement, you will have NAFTA on steroids. It will be a disaster for, right now,
it
when they talk
really-
about unemployment and the inequality of income,
Do you think that they will create a factory here with American workers, and that the owners of those factories are from Brunei or
Exactly.
Singapore?
No,
Do you think that
exactly.
they will do that?
Of course not.
Of course not.
But do you think American factories will take advantage of going over to Brunei?
We're already doing that.
Yes, we
so
are.
what difference does it make to us?
We're given more countries now to do it in.
Well,
Freely,
we're
without
doing
going
that.
through all kinds of legal,
This becomes,
right now.
becomes a
Can I
very
just-
tough issue called protectionism.
Ben,
Countries
it doesn't matter
try
what
to
country.
protect themselves.
Yes,
How
every
do they
country
do that?
should.
Yeah.
When you
well,
have
how
a
do
country
they do
like
that?
Cambodia.
We want to export our goods to you at a price that is profitable to us, but not very profitable to you. And if the other guy says, no, we don't want that.
Didn't they
So
just,
they-
one of the pharmaceutical companies just do that in India?
So what they do is the other company will says, well, no, we don't want your product. And if you insist on exporting it to us, then we'll put a tariff on that. We will double the value of that product, so much so that nobody here can afford to buy it. Well, they've already done that. And so what do we do? Well,
We've gotten rid of all the tariffs, first of all.
no,
I want you to go
we
back.
form a coup.
A coup. Yeah, that's NAFTA.
Well, that's what's happening. So anyways,
But wait a minute, before you
in the
go on,
Philippines, you know how much...
Go back to India. Talk about what the pharmaceutical company did in India.
Well, let me finish first, because
All right.
you're
I'm jumping
messing me
ahead.
up.
I'm sorry.
So, how much do you think is the price of a small Ford in the Philippines will cost you? Well, the Ford company will probably sell that car here for about $15,000.
Right.
So they ship it to the Philippines, stripped and everything. And the Philippine government will say, no, we don't want your car here. We don't want to sell Ford here. But if you insist, well, we'll give you, we'll put in an extra tariff there. And now it's going to sell for $50,000 to any of the Filipinos that can afford it. So what do we do? Well, we said, well, if you're not going to accept our car, then whatever bananas you export to us, we will also put a tariff. And it will cost
How much of this are you
$10
making up?
$10 a pound.
bunch.
A bunch. So that is called trade wars. But if you want to form a sweetheart deal, then you basically say, all right, we're going to try and trade ourselves in such a way that we will both profit, but
We'll have free trade.
darn the third party who want to get into the action, because we're not going to allow them to do that.
Right.
So this is exactly what they're doing.
That's right.
11 countries are ganging up together.
and
what do you think the other people will do, like China or Japan?
They'll
or
try to get
Korea?
into the agreement.
No, they will form their own agreement.
Ben,
And
Uh,
that
what-
had been going on for years, and nothing has happened. Nobody is ever able to monopolize trade, because every little countries will have their own little trade agreement.
so are you
with
telling
somebody.
me you think that this is a good thing?
No, I think this will not happen.
You think it will not happen?
I don't think so.
Neither people didn't think NAFTA could happen.
Oh,
I mean, because no matter what everybody said, you had, once the president is determined, Clinton was absolutely determined to get NAFTA passed. Absolutely determined.
it was already passed when Clinton came in.
No, Clinton got
I remember
NAFTA.
Ross Perot was very much against NAFTA. In any case, I don't think it will happen, Bonnie. So I think
God.
you're just an early wolf that says, or whoever called the
I'm
wolf.
an early chicken warning that there are wolves right here.
Oh, you
I
see,
don't want to be eaten up.
You're the chicken that says the sky is falling.
Oh, all right. If you believe that, please go at least do a little research. Find out a little bit about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Read both sides. But look for absolute detail. Because I think that once you realize the impact it will have on our lives, you will be as concerned about making sure that it is not passed by our Congress.
Well, my opinion is that nothing's going to happen about this. And it
You
is just
lie.
another one
You
of those
just-
trade
you-
agreements.
you
And
just
all
love
the people
pushing
are
my
thinking
buttons.
about that because it's a good political, issue that they'll say, oh yeah, we support trade, we support corporations, and we support friendly
But that's all
countries and
true,
so on.
Ben.
But that's-
No, all that is true.
Nothing.
It's just that none of them are supporting the American people. You
Well-
cannot continue to take jobs to increase our trade deficit, to increase all of the money that the Federal Reserve continues to print every single month to hold up an economy. I mean, when they talk about, whoa, our unemployment rate is down, it's down because half the people have quit looking. You know how many people are unemployed. You see them every single day.
But I have a very good example of that, and I'm not going to say anything against Walmart. It is not a company that I have anything against, and like what Russell Brand was saying, it's just that there's certain company that will have some kind of at least control and power that they're able to get the prices that they can get from a company or from a manufacturer at what their lowest price is possible.
Right.
And if they cannot do that, then too bad, because we're going to get the competing company to produce us those items. So they get them, and so what do? Rubbermaid, they have to go out of the country. It used to be made in the USA, now Rubbermaid is no longer made in the USA.
This is the other thing, because one of those chapters in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, there's a special investor protection that would again give incentives, money, incentives, offshoring by providing special benefits for companies that leave. Plus, the Trans-Pacific Partnership would impose limits on how our elected officials can use tax dollars. Banning Buy American, it would be banned. You can't even start talking about just Buy American, buy local preferences. That is going to be banned because it would be going against this Trans-Pacific Partnership. What we do need, absolutely what we need, is to have more people buying local, having more people actually pick up something and look to find out where it's made. If somebody could find me a measuring cup and measuring spoons that are made in America, I would be so happy.
Well, we did find a few of them but we have to search really, and that's how you find those items, and they're really very good, and it's fun to look for an item that says made in the USA because, you know, sometimes you won't find them, but when you find them, it's really worth it.
You always look. I mean, you have a special love
Everything
for,
that I get is made in the USA.
right. I mean,
And if it says made in China, I don't buy it.
yep. And a lot of them, though, they're now not in China, but like the refrigerator, the freezer. You cannot. America does not make refrigerators
No.
or freezers any longer.
Or any of the products that we used to really anchor our economy on, and that would be like, well, like you said, freezers, radios, and phonographs, and so on.
Television.
And the electronics, and so on. So we don't make them anymore.
No.
So there's nothing to come back to for people to work in a factory that makes them. So that's something that we need to bring back.
I guess we must have some factories that are still operating in America because they want to get those too. So I don't know, but
It will come back, Bonnie. When you know, when
our
the,
republic won't come back
the-
from all of this.
when the
Not-
economy is such that it becomes profitable for companies to put their factories in the U.S., then we'll have a lot of Made America. Well, you know, it's just one of those things. It's all determined by business profit. So let's move on. To
Well, wait a
another.
minute. Let me just stay on this just for one more minute, because I think that is one of the issues that really bothers me the most. With everything that's happened in the United States over the last, well, since 2008, okay, since this what they're calling the Great Recession, caused by major corporations and banks to a large extent. Yet, one of the things that everybody cries about is, well, you can't tax the rich. You know, you don't want to make it a war between them and us. And I don't want to see it a war between them and us either. However, they have an absolute responsibility. How they can have an American passport and look at themselves in the mirror, I don't know. Because you cannot rape a country the way we've been being raped, and then say, well, oh no, I'm already overtaxed. My tax rate is the same as my secretary's, but they have a heck of a lot more deductibles than his secretary does. He can shelter half of his millions and put it away for his retirement. And then they still have the nerve to complain that, heaven forbid, I give my fair share to Social Security. Or why should I give it to the poor? Because, you know, I mean, if I had more taxes, all we would be doing is giving more entitlement programs.
Well, let me ask you this.
This country, their
Bonnie,
wealth.
let me ask
wait a
you
minute,
this.
let me just finish my thought. Because their wealth is built on the backs of every single one of their employees. It's built on the back of every single American who's paid taxes to make sure we have an infrastructure, to make sure we have good roads and transportation, so they can take whatever their laborers or their serfs in their own little kingdom have produced, where they don't even bother to give these people retirement anymore. There's not a factory. People used to go to work in a factory, get a decent salary, and know that they could retire from that factory and live fairly well. Now, it's okay if their retirement plan goes bust. Whose fault is that? So guess where the burden lays on us? A company like Walmart's doesn't have to pay health care. No, because those people can go on welfare, which we have to pay for. So their wealth is not because of the sweat of their own brow. It's on the backs of almost every other American.
Before you continue to rant and rave about that, Bonnie,
Okay, I'm stopping.
it's not that there are not many rich people. There are many rich people, and the rich becomes richer, and that is true. It goes back 100 years. And the fact that there are rich people who can actually corner a market or become the only company that can produce that product, it's there. That is why governments are there to protect the people. And the government is not doing that.
Right.
100 years ago, there were only about maybe a handful of people in this country that actually owned money. As a matter of fact, one of those person had more money than the United States government. As a matter of fact, he loaned his money to the government with a high interest rate. So, you know, you're talking about at that time
Well, you're talking before we had the Federal Reserve. Now you have a whole bunch of rich people who loan the money to the U.S. government.
But you see, the problem of you know, the antitrust and the trust and so on, it's government regulation. But we cannot do the thing that we're doing and continue to say that, look, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, because we elect members of Congress and members of the government into giving us what we think should have been a role of the government to protect the people. Instead, they're making laws that allows these people to just feed to their greed and so on and so on. And that is not because you know, the rich wants to become richer. They just allow them to do so. So it's what the economy is about. And unless you want to live in a socialist country where the government comes in and distribute all the wealth and nobody really has to do anything, and you all get the same reward, and that kills competition,
You know
that kills productivity.
Yes, but that's not even fair. That's not even a reasonable argument. I don't think any American is for that. But Americans, to me, should not be for something that absolutely hurts them, because we do elect people that we think are going to protect us.
Well,
Thomas Jefferson said, you can elect good people, you can elect, or good people can be elected to serve the people, or people can elect people to serve them, meaning that you can buy somebody if you give, and it's human nature. Let me just talk about one of the first gifts given to Benjamin Franklin when he was the first ambassador to France. When he was leaving, he was very good friends with the king. He was a great ambassador. And when he left France, the king gave him a snuff box. It had 400 diamonds. Inside there was a portrait of the king, and with 400 diamonds encrusting this portrait. They felt that they were friends, but they had written in the Constitution under, I forgot, Article 1, Section 9, I think it was, where bribery and this kind of gift giving was illegal in the United States. It's never been taken out of the Constitution, because even our founders recognized that when someone gives you a gift, the most common response is to say thank you, and the next time, you know, when you can do a little favor for them, 400 diamonds, okay? Mm-hmm. You don't think that, so
where are you leading here, Bonnie?
That right from the beginning, everyone recognized, Ben, that taking gifts, especially large gifts, can corrupt. It can make a government corrupt. And that's why the founders, right from the beginning, said that this had a place. Corruption does not. Having a real framework for how you accept gifts. So,
and we do have that, Bonnie. And it's just a matter of being strict in your oversight. And, you know, our governor went to jail. A lot of people...
that kind of corruption's easy. That's bribery.
And that's what you're saying.
No, I'm talking about...
There are briberies that are so subtle that people don't even know that it is bribery.
I'm talking about a gift.
And you're talking about gifts, you're talking about money.
When you talk about someone that gives $300 million, okay, to a campaign, that kind of a gift is noticed by the person that they're going to be electing, all right? Yet, the Supreme Court said that's perfectly okay. So you have Citizens United. Now, I think that I just read over the past 2 days that Obama is actually considering, and I hope he does it, introducing a constitutional amendment, getting rid of, explaining that you cannot do that Citizens United is unconstitutional. I think we need a constitutional amendment for that, and I'm hopeful that he will do that.
Well, let's move on.
Do you want to show your book?
No.
Are you sure? You've got this great big book you started to read.
I thought that I would be bored listening to you, Bonnie, so I was just going to,
you are
to read
so
my book while I'm here.
Well, at least show them your book. If you think you would be bored listening to me, at least hold the book up so that they can see. Because I think for most people, I don't know if you can read that, but it's The Singular Universe and the Reality of Time.
A very thick book.
Yes. Actually, it's not quite as thick as some of the last legislation that's been passed, but
Couldn't put it down.
couldn't put it down. I
After
know.
I opened the first page.
I
All right, let's
love
move
you.
on, Bonnie,
All right.
because I don't think that argument about this
But would you-
trade
Well, would you
is going
talk
to
about
happen.
what happened to the pharmaceutical company in India?
Well, it's one of the biggest expense in healthcare is pharmaceuticals. So it's always been, but now it's getting worse for the simple reason that pharmaceutical companies now know exactly which medications their directions are, where they can charge the most. So now you're talking about eye drops that cost $300 for a month's supply.
For dry eye? Is that what?
Something like that. Now you're talking about medications for virus and that cost $1,000 a pill. And there are medications that actually it will not even blink anybody's eye, but it costs $500,000 to $700,000 a year to maintain, and it is medications that are being used for life. So the question really is, well, what's the directions of these pharmaceutical companies? Well, there was a time when people would say, well, yeah, let's get vitamins. So pharmaceutical companies makes a lot of vitamins, but now they don't profit that much. So, well, let somebody else do that. And there was a time when antibiotics were used. Oh yeah, it's going to really make a life changer for them. And so they make it, and so everybody has these antibiotics. But today, it's not really that profitable to most pharmaceutical companies. So they don't come up with anything new. So there had not been a new antibiotics recently to help us fight infectious disease. And the infectious diseases are getting more resistant and are getting smarter. And what we have are just old antibiotics. Because every pharmaceutical companies now know where the money is. And that is, they now know how to
Erectile
make...
dysfunction?
They now know how to make these silver bullets that will target those specific diseases. So basically, they now have a bacterial or monoclonal type of antibody that they can inject to somebody. And it all started out with people with rheumatoid arthritis. And they have these medications that give this to this person, and they don't have to take all those other medications that they used to that are full of side effects. So they have these new medications. And lo and behold, it probably made a difference in the management of these patients. And the only problem is that this medicine costs so much. You're talking about a medication that will cost somebody almost $10,000 to $20,000 a year.
Is this the one that was being made in India?
Oh, no, that's not the one. So, the most recent medication that came out, well, actually a year ago, is this medicine that is used to treat hepatitis C, because hepatitis C has been quite destructive. It can cause liver cirrhosis, and it can lead to liver transplant. So basically, the expense on taking care of a patient with hepatitis C is can be quite expensive. And actually, that's what happened to, I think, one of the Judd mother, Naomi Judd. Yeah, she had this hepatitis C and had to undergo liver transplant. So in any case, hepatitis C is common, but not all of them will develop liver cirrhosis, and not all of them will need a liver transplant. But for those that have it, one company now is able to make a medication that will kill the virus. And isn't it great? For some time, I mean, for the first time, you can get a medicine that you give to that person, that can kill a virus. Wouldn't it be nice if
That'd
you
be
have
terrific.
that kind of
So-
medication that can kill an HIV and
Right.
make the person HIV again free?
Free.
And that would be nice. So these are things that the companies are making now, except that this company who discovered this medication and who made this medication also knows that it is profitable to charge them $1,000 a pill. So a course of treatment would sometimes involve 80 pills. So that can cost something like 80,000 minimum. So to treat that. So, but they can charge it because they're the only company in town that has this product. And so other companies are making the same issue. And like I said, there is a company, a US company, that makes medication that is targeted towards a certain rare diseases. Sometimes we call
The orphan.
paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, which is very rare, and adult hemolytic uremic syndrome, which is very rare. But these medications, and these are inborn errors of metabolism, meaning that they were born with this. So they have to be kept stable by taking this medicine, which is going to be a lifelong medication. But unfortunately, it will cost between $500,000 to $700,000 a year to maintain them. So, going back to the hepatitis C hepatitis C medication, India is really smart. India is saying that, look, if you are going to market your medicine to India and sell it to India, you have to give us the right to your patent. In other words, you have to give us your formula so that we can make these medications ourselves and that we can sell it to our people at a very generic price, which is very, very small.
And this caused a lawsuit.
And this obviously caused a lawsuit because of, a lot of Western pharmaceutical companies will not want to do that. They will not release their medicine to, the formula of their medication to the Indian government, because they don't want India to mass produce them and use it in their own people, and at the same time may not want to make these companies produce all these medications and then export them to Europe. So there was a lawsuit, and of course the Indian government says, well, look, we make our own rules and so on. So if you want to sell your medication, then give us your formula. If you don't want to, then don't come here. So basically, that's what. Eventually,
What did the pharmaceutical
the CEO of this company that marketed this medicine against hepatitis C said, well, we invented these medications, and these are for Western countries who can afford to buy this medicine, and they're not made for the Indian people. So
it's not made for the poor, basically.
So
we make it for the rich that can
so
afford it.
So basically, the pharmaceutical companies are really having its, I would say, golden age at this time. Well, because they can make everything that they want. And even the old medications, they reformulate and jack up the price in such a way that it becomes very expensive and profitable to them. The same thing as with vaccines.
Well, let's talk about the vaccines, because there's a lot of misinformation, particularly about the measles vaccine. And we've had the epidemic now that started in California, spread all the way over to New York. I mean, they've had a couple cases in New York that put a panic on everyone. But I thought it was very interesting that all of this, the misinformation on the vaccines, actually started with the British physician. He did that paper that said linking vaccines to childhood, to something.
To childhood autism.
Autism.
And now there has been, and well, that was his first statement, but that since then there has been a lot of study that show that there's no link whatsoever. And unfortunately, this message continued on, and that actually there is a lady here in the U.S. that would go on lecture circuit advising mothers against vaccinations. And so at one time, about 10 years ago, she became very popular. So she is still very popular. She gets invited to talk about, anti-vaccination.
Well, even elected officials, Rand Paul and Christie from New Jersey, both of them started saying that, well, I can understand mothers not giving their vaccines because, it's not been proven. Of course it's been proven that they are safe.
Yeah. The thing about this also is this, that when you merge medicine and politics, it's always the people that gets to be getting the short end of it. And it is no different than when the AIDS epidemic started. When politics and medicine converge, it's always the people, and that's why there were not many people that get treated immediately
early,
because obviously there were some politicians who said that this is something that
even in Norwich, because you're right, because even in Norwich, people were afraid to even say that yes, we have 2 cases of AIDS in the community. They were so afraid to even admit it. But at any rate, okay.
So you have the measles vaccine.
This isn't the first outbreak of measles. In 2011, again, the same thing happened. We had 118 cases in 23 states because, again, people had stopped immunizing their children. But that was not the worst. It was in, when was this? In the 1990s. Well, during, wait a minute, I'm sorry, because the worst one was in 2011. Well, in 2011, the U.S. did pretty well. We only had 118 cases. The worst country was actually France. There were 33 countries in Europe that had these terrible outbreaks of measles, which is where the United States got that 118 cases from. But there were approximately 10,000 cases in Europe for the first 4 months of 2011. There were 12 cases of encephalitis, which is a complication, and 360 cases of severe measles pneumonia, and 6 measles-related deaths. People forget that, measles can cause death, especially in infants that are when they're too young first to get the vaccines. But during 1989 and 1991, there was again a resurgence of the measles in the United States. It caused 100 deaths. We had 55,000 cases in the United States, and that was in 1991. And it caused 100 deaths in the United States for measles. The only way to tackle something like measles, it is a preventable disease.
And it goes back to how you educate the people. Now, obviously, different cultures will have a different idea as to how they should be vaccinated. But let's just talk in this country as what the measles vaccines are, or how they view measles vaccine. The most intelligent people and the higher educated people, our daughter, basically read a lot about these things, but they, again, going back to the media, you got to find out exactly where your source is coming from rather than just to accept them. But when you already have your mindset thinking that you should not give measles vaccines to your child, all you need to do is look at those articles that are not in a very reliable journals, and you will say, aha, so that's really exactly what it is. But the fact of the matter is that the first theory that measles might cause autism had already been debunked by subsequent scientific study and medical study, and was published a long time ago in the British Medical Journal.
He did that report. He wrote that article based on 3 children.
So there has been a lot of other reports published that show that there is really no association. But the more you say that, the more these young mothers will read, and they will say, well, they're just not telling us the truth, and so we will not vaccinate our children. So they go to a school in their state, and they were told that you have to vaccinate your children, and the more they will dig in and say, well, I'm not going to have my child vaccinated. Well, in California, there are some schools there that half of the children have not been vaccinated, and yet here they're going into the school and mixing with the other children that have been vaccinated. Well, the fact is that this whole thing there is power in group. In other words, if you want to eradicate disease, you should get the entire population immune in order for that virus or disease to be totally abolished.
They call that herd immunity?
Herd immunity. A very good example for that would be smallpox. And at one time, of course, people were dying more of smallpox than during the Civil War in battlefront theory.
Right.
South American Indians were wiped out with smallpox, brought them from Europe. So there is that mentality, there is that group immunity that you need. Now, in this case, it's because there's a certain group that says that we won't vaccinate, and yet the group that had been vaccinated, there's a large group, so they kind of covered and protected the group that did not get vaccinated.
So you're talking about a very small percentage.
Right. Now, as you get into more and more groups that had several unvaccinated children, so this disease will jump from one group, and before you know it, you will have an entire countrywide epidemic of measles. Now, in Europe, it's also different than the United States, because in Europe, there's a lot of immigrants in Europe that do not believe in vaccinations. And those are the ones that really are getting these measles spread over and over to one country, to the other country, to the other country, and they bring it sometimes into the United States, and they get into the schools that have a small amount of people that have been not vaccinated. So that's how it's transmitted. So the important thing is that vaccination is probably the best cure, or I would say prevention, for having this kind of epidemics. It will always happen because we have not truly eradicated measles, for the simple reason that there's always somebody in the world that has the measles, and it will just keep on spreading. And the same thing as with polio.
Well, but we're doing so well. Let me put a plug in for Rotary, because Rotary started with the polio vaccine. It was a Rotary project after the United States had the terrible polio epidemic in the 50s. Rotary began doing polio immunization in the Philippines. And I think we vaccinated within a very short period of time over 300,000 children. And we continue to do that. We've got the United Nations involved. Right now, we have, there were 3 countries left that are endemic for polio: Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nigeria. Nigeria was our hardest country at one point because they believed that the polio vaccine was a threat by the United States to make all of their people infertile. We used the Rotary clubs in Nigeria. Nigeria now is going the way of India. We have not had one single case in Nigeria now for over 6 months. We don't say it's a non-endemic country until they've been polio-free for 3 years. But Afghanistan has only had 1 case in the last several months, but it's Pakistan that is our biggest problem right now. But Rotary won't give up, so we're going to keep doing it. So,
well, going back to the measles vaccine, yes, this is now getting some media hype, and yes, people are now being told about this outbreak of measles, And so we now are getting a lot of phone calls from elderly people, 70 or 80 years old, saying that, well, gee, I should get a measles vaccine. And well, my response is that if you've had measles vaccine as a child, you don't need to have a repeat measles vaccine or a booster vaccine. But in order to be sure, we can always check your blood test and find out if you're immune. So yes, it is getting into the media, and the media is trying to hype it. So now you would say, well, the measles outbreak this year has been so bad and kids are dying. Well, it had been happening in the last few years. And now, once you have this topic about vaccination or non-vaccination, it brings this up to, again, the forefront, because there are still people who will believe that measles vaccine, the MMR, childhood immunization, can cause autism.
But and we've already proven it doesn't. But one of the other things, with Rotary giving the polio vaccine, we call it Polio Plus because we are immunizing children against all of those childhood diseases. It wasn't just polio. But in 2013, just little over a year ago, there were 145,700 measles cases globally, with roughly 400 deaths every day. I mean, those are horrible statistics. So if you know someone who does believe that the measles vaccine can cause your child harm, please be dissuaded from that thinking and get your child vaccinated. It is the only thing that will actually protect them.
Well, for a while there were several rumors that these vaccines it's the ingredient in this vaccine that caused the autism. And indeed, when they look at, there's a little speck of mercury, I think.
And that's been eliminated.
And that's been eliminated. But again, those that believe that the measles vaccine can cause autism would immediately say, aha, see, I told you there is something in that vaccine that can cause harm. So as a result of which, that had been eliminated years and years ago. But still, the concept is not going to go away.
No. I think that we would like to thank our crew, Ben Lathrop in the control room with a new intern. We have an intern from Norwich Regional Tech, Tyler Brooks. So welcome, Tyler. I hope you enjoy